We're here at Washington City Hall, the council chamber, for our regularly scheduled workshop meeting. Our meetings are also broadcast live at washingtoncity.org/meetings and archived for later viewing. Council, we just have a few items on the agenda tonight. I'll turn to you for an approval of the agenda as outlined.
Make it, Mayor. Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Ivey, second by Councilman Coates. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. We'll jump right in with our first item, and this is a Parks and Trails update. I've asked Assistant Leisure Services Director Paul Walker to give the council an update on all of the projects and work you have been about so diligently.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, council and mayor. Let's see if I can stream this. Okay. Okay, thanks. We'll get right into it now. So we'll kind of go in order of progress with these projects. This one's really close to completion. This is the Grapevine Trailhead. We're really excited for this one. It's really close to being done. Substantial work is done. We're going through the punch list on a few things. We hope to get the certification of occupancy any day now, and we'll have it open to the public. This we budgeted this year was $3.5 million of impact fee funds. We also received funds from the Utah Division of Outdoor Recreation for $750,000, and the Greater Zion Tax Advisory Board gave us $750,000 towards this project too. So we're really excited for this project. It's a 9-acre site. The project includes a mile of paved trail. You can see here this is a couple weeks old. Construction's a little further along than this, but it includes a mile of trail. There's a couple pedestrian bridges over some washes. This connects to the trails in the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve, and the trail goes along Washington Parkway down to Main Street, connects to the trails in Main Street as well. This project includes a substation, which the power department will work on as it's needed. It includes horse trailer parking. We've got really good equestrian access. They can access the trail along the perimeter without needing to go through the park at all. This is the pedestrian or the passenger vehicle parking and the bathrooms. We have really nice restrooms here, great shaded seating, and it's really nice and cool under there. It's a really good project. The ribbon cutting is the 27th of September, so we're excited for that.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Everyone's invited. There's a hike at 8 a.m.
That's right.
Yep. So
Mayor's leading out on that.
We're really excited for that.
It's gonna be fun. We won't go too far.
So we've done a lot of work with this. We work with SITLA and the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve. So we're really excited for this project. The next one, this is the Wheels Park.
Can we stay on the trailhead for just a minute?
Sure.
So I've been up there 5 or 6, maybe 7 times over the last month because I'm really excited about it. I went up with Councilman Coates and we looked at it, and I've been back. I had just a couple of questions, and I wanted to maybe see if the council had any other thoughts.
Yeah, for sure.
So my wife and I hiked the Grapevine Trail on Saturday, and because we'd had some recent rain, it was soft enough that we went ahead and did Bracken's Loop and came all the way back around. There was a lot of sand in our shoes by the end. So I'm wondering, is there a spigot where you can tie off a hose to spray off that concrete pad?
Yeah, we do. There's a spigot underneath there where we can hose it off and keep it clean and nice.
Another idea, maybe if you still have some budget, would be a little bench right where you step over in like just where there's already some sand. Because I took half a cup of sand out of my shoes, but not a big deal. And then the other question I had, it's close to the freeway, but I like how it sits back up away. But I just was wondering kind of what the process is for just to kind of make sure that we don't have overnight camping in that maybe the equestrian parking area, or they don't have maybe some semis just pull off?
Yeah.
And just, have you given that some thought?
So we've got a few security features. We've got it wired for cameras. We'll be installing cameras that will show the parking lot and in the bathroom. We've got timed locks that will close it when the park's hours are it'll only be open during their regular park's hours. And then we'll have cameras there to.
Where are the gates?
So.
Just the restrooms.
Oh, just the
Just the
restrooms
restrooms.
close off?
Yeah, the
there's-
doors will lock on each individual restroom at 10 o'clock or whatever we.
Are there, will you put some signs up like no overnight parking or no
Yeah.
camping, stuff like that?
Yeah, if it becomes a problem, we can definitely add
If
some
it becomes a
signage,
problem, okay.
and yeah, we can definitely do that.
I thought when the mayor said, I know this is close to the freeway, I thought he was gonna request some sound walls.
No, it's a great view from up there. It's a really, really good location we're excited about.
Is there any other thoughts? I didn't mean to, I just had those questions. Council, any other thoughts, comments on the trailhead?
I just appreciate Paul's work on it. It's been great to work with him on it, and I'm super excited for it, and hope everyone can come out and enjoy it. It's really shaping up. It has, like I said, there's a few punch list items that were like ticky-tacky punch list items to get through, and then it'll be, we're hoping if we can get CO this week. Drew's nice to Paul.
Mayor, I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. Councilman Coates tried hard to get our schedules to align and go look at it, but I did finally make it up there and saw it, but very pleased with the way it turned out. And just to maybe share some information is that when Salente came in and when we talked about this trailhead, it was very important that we have enough room that any visitors or residents would be able to go there and be able to find a parking spot and be able to utilize the amenities there. And there's one thing I'm very proud of or pleased about is that we listened, and that's the project that we've got. It'll accommodate everyone that wants to go there, from what I can tell. And I think that's a great thing when you have something like this and be able to not limit its use. I think that's exactly the right approach, and I'm very pleased with the way it turned out.
That's a good point. I remember you were talking about the importance of public access. So this and the others will remain public access. That's fantastic.
And Mayor, one of the great things is Paul did a great job at the county to get that additional $750,000, which helps us so we can move that money to other projects that we have. So I think I appreciate Paul and Jordan doing that. Like it definitely was huge. So.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Jordan Hess was a big help with that process as well. And that's a great point, is Washington Parkway gets busier and busier. Before, people were just parking on the road, unloading their horse trailer on the side of the road, so this is much safer option. Did
you say you had a little bit more of that split rail fencing to maybe block off the old parking area, or?
We had some excess, and we used it along the frontage on George Washington Boulevard.
Okay.
So that people wouldn't continue to park.
On Washington
on
Parkway.
Washington Parkway.
Yeah.
Too many Washingtons.
I know.
So that we don't want people parking on Washington Parkway and then walking.
Yeah.
So we try to get everyone to come up through the parking lot and avoid where they had been parking.
Good.
Okay, Washington Wheels Park, we're all really familiar with this. This is on George Washington Boulevard. It's 14 acres that were donated to the city. We've been working on this for quite a while, and we're really getting to come close to going out to bid. Just a reminder, some of the features in there, we've got some really great skate features that Spawn Ranch is designing for us. This kind of layout of the skate features, as well as many other types of bike features for mountain biking and pump tracks. There's a wide variety of projects going in here. So it's been kind of complicated to tie all these projects together. It will have a very nice playground, the biggest playground we've got. It'll have some accessible features to it, so we're excited for this to have this big accessible playground in Washington, as well as a large splash pad. So those are really popular features in our parks now, as splash pads are quite popular. This is kind of show where we're at now. This is the grading plan. It's really a complicated site. We've been working with Public Works and the NRCS. It isn't a detention basin, and that detention basin still needs to function as a detention basin. So as we've planned and done work, we have to retain the same volume in the detention basin. Everything we bring in, we have to bring that same volume out, so it still holds the same amount and still functions as a detention basin. We had to tweak our plans slightly. We had to move a bathroom. We can't have structures within the 100-year floodplain, so we've tried to work closely with the NRCS and Public Works to get that stuff done. We completed mass grading early in the spring, so we did a cleanup project in the detention basin, and we were able to raise the area that has the bike and skate features by a couple feet so that when there were large water events that they wouldn't get flooded or they would be the last thing to be flooded. This picture on the right, there's a yellow line. It's a little hard to see, but that will hold the first 1.2 million cubic feet of water. It will be up to 9 feet deep, and that's when it starts getting into the features of the park. And that's when we would begin to have power shut off and close park and things like that. But for most water events, we think the park will still be able to handle it without us needing to close the park. So this is going through review with Public Works right now. We're hoping to have the reviews back and the final designs completed, and hopefully it can go out to bid within the next month or so. Another project that we're in the middle of is the Covington home expansion. There's a few aspects to this. This is RAP tax funded. The city allocated $450,000, and Greater Zion gave $100,000 as well towards this project. The first phase of this is the back parking lot. The city was donated a half-acre lot directly behind the Covington home. That's in the process of becoming a parking lot right now. They've got a lot of the flat work done. The curbs are poured. The end of next week is when they're scheduled to pour the asphalt, so it's moving along quite quickly. The Parks Department will landscape it in-house, so the next few weeks they'll be able to start putting the irrigation and the trees in that. So we're hoping to have the parking lot portion done in October. And then the other parts of this will be moving the Bishop Storehouse. We've got a cement pad poured there to move the Bishop Storehouse to. And then there'll be renovations to the existing shed and building an ADA restroom. And they'll all tie in with the same look and feel as the Covington home.
Questions on that one, council? Thoughts?
So this next one is the George Washington Plaza. I'm sure we've all seen this as we've driven by when George Washington Boulevard was realigned. That left this remnant piece. It's 0.6, 0.7 acres. And we're gonna take this piece and it will be kind of a welcome sign to Washington. There's a bronze statue by Jerry Anderson of George Washington, and it will go in here in this plaza. There'll be some signage that you'll be able to see heading both directions that says Washington City and lets people know that they're in Washington City. This plan, there is some green in there. It's synthetic turf. We're gonna try a small section of synthetic turf in there. There'll be some landscaping, some walkways, some benches. There'll be room in the future to add more statues and more things to tell the story of Washington. And we've been working with Public Works to make sure where this was a road, there's a water main and a sewer main that go through there. So we're adjusting our design so we don't put the plaza on top of a water main. So it's still all really doable. So we're excited to go through this project. We're hoping to have it done by Cotton Days this next spring. This upcoming year will be the USA 250 celebration, and it will start in the spring and run through 4th of July of next year. So we're really excited to be able to tie this tie this project into that event.
Paul, I appreciate you bringing that out. I anticipate this ribbon cutting to be a big kickoff of that America 250. Can you just point out, I know this is right up your alley as a Utah State horticulture guy, but can you just the council gave some feedback on this project. We changed the water feature out. Can you just talk maybe about the plants, trees,
Yeah.
and some of those things?
So we won't have any turf in here. It's not really an area where turf would work well in there. So we've got that synthetic turf just to give it a nice look as people are driving by. There'll be a rose garden, some rose bushes behind it. We'll give some color. This will all be drip irrigation, and it will tie into some of the landscaping that is already there on the right of way that the HOA owns. So this will mostly be trees, shaded areas for people to walk through and sit at benches. So the landscaping, it will be open and I don't want to say minimal, but it will be mostly small shrubs and trees to provide shade. So we haven't decided on varieties yet, but it will be mostly for the function to provide shade. Give people a place to get out of the heat. This is the first phase of Mill Creek Trail. This is under design right now. It will go from the existing trail under Telegraph near Nyson Park up to the Boilers Park. It will connect to the Boilers Park. So this is in this year's budget with RAP tax funds. Washington County also gave $500,000 towards this project. There'll be several pedestrian bridges, and it will be about 0.7 miles. The design is 30% completed. We're working with the landowner to work on the alignment, make sure we've got the alignment the way it works for the landowner and the city, and then we'll be getting the final easement, and we'll be able to complete the design and move forward. So this, as I said, will connect to the existing parking lot down on 200 South, and it will go north under Buena Vista. It will stub up there for a future phase of the trail to go north along Mill Creek in the future. It will go to the east to Boilers Park, and then it will continue through that grocery complex, and the trail will tie into the trail on Main Street in Embrio and up to Washington Parkway and connect into our trail system. We're really excited about this. This gives people a good option to cross I-15 while avoiding the interchanges. People can ride their bikes and walk through and get on the other side of I-15 without trying to go through the lights and the busyness of an interchange. This next one, we're really excited about this one. This is the historic Canal Trail. There's sections of this that are in place now that have come along with development, but it's mostly still open and ready to be built. From one end to the other, all told, it's about 6 miles of trail. Right now, we are working with an acquisition specialist to acquire easements from homeowners and property owners to run the trail through. Right now, we're going to go out to bid on a few small sections to make some connections, but we've had really good progress with getting easements. We've got probably 15 or so, and a dozen more we've got verbal commitments with, or we're in the process of acquiring the easements. So as those easements are acquired, we'll try to pave sections from one street to another to make those connections. So that's come along really well. The city's also been able to purchase several remnant parcels that are along the trail route. So we're excited to start moving on this trail. We've had really good response from the homeowners, and we run into people when we're out looking around and surveying, and they're happy, and they're excited and can't wait to have this trail going.
Questions, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Paul, I got just a question on that commercial piece across from Staley Farm. Do we know the status of that development?
We have an easement there on the west side across from Staley Farm.
They already provided an easement
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the trail along the road?
Yes, they've come through their plans and through staff developer, and we have an easement along there. Actually, we don't have an easement. They are going to build the trail as part of their
Yeah,
project.
do you have I don't know what their schedule is. I know we approved their PCD or PUD a while back. You haven't heard anything in a while?
I don't know what their schedule is.
They have plans in, but I don't.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
plans are in.
What I've been told.
Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
Along the river, is that mostly BLM land?
Yeah, so we're going through the process of permitting with the BLM. Once you get it around Shinabkai, it will be in the BLM land, so we're in the process of that. So we're moving in several locations on this trail, just everywhere we can get easements and some movement, we're working on every area we can.
And you said this, but this is the feedback that I've gotten too, is that people are actually, there's becoming more and more excitement about getting this going. And I think the approach has been the right one to do. I mean, there's a few different ways to approach this, but I think the way we're approaching this with identifying the different parcels and working with the property owners is the right way. And so thank you to you and your team and those those you're working with to acquire these easements. This has been a long time coming to try to find a path forward, and it's exciting that I just signed another easement 10 minutes ago, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're excited to see some movement on this project. Kind of going along with this project is the common area. It's along the canal easement. In the Indian Hills area, this is 1.75 acres. It's kind of a remnant piece left over from the HOA that never was developed into any amenities for the neighborhood. So the city's acquired this piece. This is just the preliminary concept of it. It will just be a place where people can take a break off the trail. There'll be a pavilion, benches, drinking fountain, some play features for the neighborhood and for those traveling along the trail. Pineview Park Trail, this is in the planning stages. We have talked with St. George City and are working in conjunction with them. This is a trail, it will go from Pineview Park to the city limits with St. George. And then from there, St. George will pick it up and tie it into their trail system. It's the first phase of the trail that's master planned to go all along the south and the east side of the Virgin River Trail. So we've got some concepts of it. The trail, most of it will go along the erosion protection project that was completed a year or two ago. So we're kind of going along the side of that. So hopefully the trail will be, as protected as it can be, and it will be a great place to have a trail.
Does that tie into anything existing right now?
Right now,
On the southwest end, it doesn't, right?
No, it doesn't. We've talked with St. George. They're designing their end of the trail as well. It will go all the way down to Springs Park in St. George. So we've talked to them about trying to do it at the same time so we can save money on the project if we can do it at the same time.
You don't happen to, did they tell you their time frame?
No, I think they're getting close. They have some easements to acquire. The city also has a few easements to acquire, but they want to get it done this budget year.
Okay.
My last little update is the cemetery. Section 4 we completed in early 2021, and we have just gone over 50% sold. It's been really popular. When it first went in, there was some pent-up demand, and the demand hasn't really stopped. So it's been in about 3.5 years, and we sold 700 plots in that time. So we've got about 700 plots left. It's just really, really popular. Our cemetery crew does a great job. They're really busy. They do 1 to 2 burials a week, and they're just doing a great job. And that's it in a nutshell. Any questions?
Paul,
Council.
on the cemetery, I know we have some tentative ideas, but I think it'd be nice in the coming future if we only have 700 and we sold 700 in the past 4 years, that's a growing trend. We might need to work on that a little quicker.
Yeah. It's good to have that on our radar.
We're open to thoughts. The biggest problem we run into is the cost, and it's so expensive that if we have to purchase it, or to bury people. So I think if you come across people or ideas as you're out,
Okay.
council or staff, I think we're open to it. We looked at potentially getting some from the BLM and ran into some roadblocks there, but we're always looking for new places.
Jeremy's backyard's open.
For my burial plot.
Second.
Take care of one person.
Just, at Wills Park, we can just talk for that for just a second.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are reaching out, wanting to know timeline, on that, and I understand that there's trouble with transformers and trying to get all the different partners together, and been having weekly Zoom meetings and working along there. So the approximate date to start would be around the 1st of November with an 8-month build. Is that still what we're shooting for?
Yeah, that's still what we're shooting for. So completion middle of the summer next year is probably likely at this point.
And the plans, we've got plans at review stage for Public Works? or
Yeah,
for building
Public Works
permit?
is reviewing the plans. They've reviewed the grading plan, and they're reviewing the other plans with
They're
our
being very
engineer.
responsive.
Yeah, they've been good to work with.
I know they are.
They're busy, but they've been helpful.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilman Henderson?
Hey, so at one time, 20 to 25 years ago, the city had talked about putting a park down in the gully up in, the gully that separates Green Springs from Brio, There's a big wide spot down in that gully. Has there been any additional talk about that? I know.
That's still in our master plan, and so that's still on the radar. This trail that we talked about, the Mill Creek Trail, the plan is for it to tie into that park when that park
Okay.
comes. So the future phase of the trail to the north will probably involve that park. It'll probably come when that park comes.
Thanks.
Any additional questions or comments? Paul?
Thank you. We're excited for these projects. We're thankful for the support we've had from the council. It was a busy year. It's going to be another busy year. We're adding 30 plus acres and 3 to 4 miles of trails this year. So we're excited to have such great projects to work on.
Well, you're doing a great job, and certainly these new projects are exciting. Will you also just from the council just express our appreciation to all those employees that maintain our parks and keep them all looking so nice, and you drive around and see flowers that look good. I know I speak for this body. Just please express that sincere appreciation back to every single one you work with there.
Okay, sure will. Thank you.
Mayor, I would also say Paul undersold this a little bit. These are some difficult projects. I mean, when you talk about building a park in a detention basin and trying to get 60 plus easements for trails, they're tough. And him and his team have done a spectacular job. So he's making this look easier than it really is, but that's kind of his way. So appreciate it.
Great. Next item on the workshop is compensation policy. City Manager Jeremy Redd, will you take this away?
Thanks, Mayor. The other feedback I get is that we don't get enough Ruth Holyoke in these meetings. And so we brought Ruth in today and Mike Swallow from Personnel Systems. I think most of you are aware, during the budget process, we had extensive discussions about different budget items. One of those is compensation, and recognize that it's probably time for us to update our compensation policy, make sure that we're all aware of what is included in there, and have it passed by resolution so that we have a policy to work on as we move forward. So Ruth and I and Mike have been working on this a little bit in the background, and we invited them to come today and give you a little presentation on how that works. As we go through it, as I mentioned in the briefing document, a couple of things that we're looking for from the council to finish that policy are, number one, where would the council like to be in the market as far as compensation? And number two, what market are we looking to fit in? And so I'll kind of turn the time over to Ruth and Mike and let them give you an explanation of how this happens, how they are able to go through the policy and the compensation model for the employees, and leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. But the end goal after we're all done won't be tonight, but another subsequent meeting, we'll look and pass a compensation policy by resolution. So you two are up.
I'll just start while Mike's getting his computer set up and ready to go, just to let you know that he'll go through what he does for Washington City, the processes of what he goes through and how he comes to the conclusions that he has. Any questions that you guys may have, go ahead, feel free to ask. And if there's anything that I need to jump in, I'll jump right in and help out.
To the way of introduction, and you can introduce yourself a little bit too, Mike. Some of you have met Mike before. He's been he's helped us with our compensation for how long, Ruth? You,
Or more.
It feels like that.
It's been at least 20,
Yeah.
long
20,
time. We'll say
24 years.
decades.
Yes, decades works.
I worked with Mike at a previous city, and I would say he probably works with 80% of the cities in Utah between TechNet and personnel systems. But so this isn't his first rodeo, and he's really experienced and a great asset to the city. But anyway, we'll pass it along now if you're ready.
Thanks, Jeremy. Lots of different places we could start in this conversation. A couple of key foundational elements, if you're going to talk compensation, we would separate the worth of work from the worth of the worker. So it's a key dynamic as we start to talk about what is it that gives worth to the workplace and worth to the jobs itself. So a governing instrument is the job description. So we go out of our way, and you go out of your way to make sure that those job descriptions are spot on, that the essential functions are well described, that the essential minimum qualifications to enter into the job are well documented and supported. But I might offer an interesting question to begin with, and it is, when is it legal to discriminate in pay? What do you think of that as a question? So what is important is to establish an approach that is public policy compliant, and federal law says that it's okay, it's legal to differentiate, change the word just a little bit, in pay based on job knowledge, responsibility, difficulty, and work environment. And the specific law to that is the Classification Act, and that act goes beyond to say that those four elements, the differences, the proportional differences in those four things. And in order to proportion, we need to quantify. So what you see up here on the screen is a quantified approach. This is the factor one, job knowledge. And so knowledge, responsibility, difficulty, work environment, all has a matrix. And we run the question for every job through the exercise. And so I'll just briefly pop them up here a little bit, but about responsibility, we're going to assess it according to accountability and accuracy with controls over the work, with levels and nature and types. We have supervision, not contacts and budget, helping to define responsibility attached to the job, back up to our knowledge statement. But we have skills and abilities with formal education and training. Those are your minimum qualifications in the job descriptions. And then how much time is required for any candidate to be considered a legitimate applicant and to be considered for an appointment to those positions. Difficulty, we're looking at it in terms of judgment and decision-making, consequences of error that could potentially influence or impact the city, complexity and variety of work, and then we consider stress in the workplace. Does anybody have that? A little bit of stress in the workplace? So some stress, moderate, considerable, critical incident is public safety specific. So we have a dynamic in there that lets us acknowledge key issues and servicing to the public as well. Work environment, physical effort, working conditions. We do acknowledge also that there are different elements of exposure. If you have a job or you are an individual in a job that operates equipment in the public right of way. And not only is that an issue for them, but for the city. So your liability exposures in those circumstances are significant if things are not following the proper preparations, licensing, credentials, continuing education units, and all of those kinds of things are helpful. So when we go through the process, we take the job description, and every single job in the city has a spot in this instrument. And we could sort this by department. Right now, it's sorted from the highest valued job down to the lowest valued based on job description. Then there's nothing about this process that is cast in stone. So subject matter experts, wherever they appear in the organization, are invited to offer their insights and input about that. And so Ruth has the key role, and Jeremy, to respond to those kinds of questions and then to involve me at any time that they might want to do that. So I frequently get job descriptions, and I get to take the first cut at where jobs fall and making an assignment to points. So if I took our city attorney right here, what I would do, I would start right there and I'd type an equals. Then I'd go back to my job knowledge tab, and the attorney's minimum qualifications in the job description would lead me to that spot right there. So I select it, and it's entered, and I could do that same thing across the way. Experience needed to enter into the job, licensing credentials, so forth. Those are bonus points, percentages of the primary award. We have bonus points in responsibility for that budget, supervision, and contacts, and these are internal and external customers. So it's both here within the city and outside, and anybody that they interact with to help them do their job better for you. Difficulty, talked about that, stress element, work environment, physical working conditions, and special hazards. So we have the points, and you are on a pay grade system. So there is a methodology used to decide how to distribute those points in such a way to capture or to create. Here in this case, we've got 35 pay grades. And that pay grade methodology has been around a long time. And so those are always areas of interest, area of question. Employees may come forward to say, my job has this level and this role, and somebody else is a pay grade 15, and I think my job ought to be worth more than that job. You ever hearing that? So that'll pop up occasionally. And so the defensibility of all of these decisions feeds back into the common ground, the instrumentation. It keeps you out of harm's way, particularly as you start looking at decisions impacting individuals that might even roll into hard issues related to discharge. Consistency is crucial, and liability mitigation is huge when you come to having that consistent toolbox doing what it needs to do for you. So that is the exercise, that is the instrument. Let's see what else I got here. Okay, so that overlays on top of the market, those job values and pay grades. Statistically, there is a dollar value for every pay grade that we might construct based on a market analysis. If you go back to your stats classes, everybody remember those? Regression analysis, growth patterns, and pay rates. So what we do, you take our survey data, and here is, we throw the net out there and we find what the marketplace is paying. Let me get over here a little bit. Get to, whoops. So we see the localities that have been attached to this exploration of the marketplace. When you take a snapshot of the market, start an analysis, I like to the moon. I like to throw the net as far as and wide as I can throughout the state and then see how we fare in relationship to that. So in this example, in this analysis for you that we did, we had these localities in here. So we have, what do we have in total number of we had, I don't like that gizmo. 32 entities contributed to this analysis and our look at city administrator, city manager. So when we start to do that, we take and ask the question, if every entity that we're looking at valued that job the same, and their value is reported here and shown, what is the statistically predicted pay based on that trend? So we have a trend issue that we get to explore from the lowest paid job all the way through the highest, and we get to see how that fares out. But here we have an average of that group at 126,000 minimum starting rate, and we see that the statistically predicted value comes in to be something else. But we have errors that we can look at. I'm going too far and deep into the weeds maybe here.
Is this, the numbers here, is this total compensation?
This is base pay only.
Base pay only, okay, thank you.
The total comp is a good question, and it is a significant aspect of management and ability to attract and retain the talent. So your benefit package, just shooting from the hip, but I would bet that it's citywide. If you look at the total cost of premiums for the city, I'll bet you've got an average of a 40% benefit package on top of base pay. Ruth, what is that? Does that sound about right? Spot on. So, that's pretty typical.
Did you say 40% on top of the base pay is the benefit? Okay.
That's the dollar cost of your benefit package. If you're looking at life, health, disability, any other retirement, right off the bat, your retirement package is going to be probably 18 to 20% unless you're public safety, and then you're up in considerably larger contribution rates. So those, and another interesting note maybe is that when you look at non-worked paid time, a huge benefit working in the public sector. So every 12 days is a 4.6% pay increase. So if I'm working here for 30, 40 years and I'm accumulating time off at a certain pace and I can max out and get 20 days, 30 days paid vacation, that is very attractive motivation to stay and work for you as a public employer. One of the many things. So we end up with a pay plan, and there's a dynamic that appears in this pay plan illustration that I think you might like, and that is asking and answering the question, competitive objective. Where do you want to be? Consider all of the issues that you're dealing with, the ability to attract and retain, how you tap into the labor market and the talent pool. If you look at this possibility, there are four basic considerations. We've got parity, which is market average, got comparability, which is a little bit different twist on total comp versus, and including base pay, competitive or trendsetter. Do you want to be the trendsetter on the marketplace and acquire the advantages for that position? Maybe not. But in this picture here, if we were to ask that question, and as you start to approach a budget cycle, you've got visions and expectations on how you fare, but if you felt like as a city, we need to be a little bit more on the cutting edge. In this feature right here, we can say, let's add 10% And that instantly refreshes the pay plan, and you can see dynamically what that would be on a pay range for every pay grade. If you felt like of our very healthy package and added value compensation, we can come in a little bit under that. What if we said we could be negative 10%, modify our starting rates based on that perception, and then weigh in heavily on the other elements of our employment opportunity?
I ask you a question right there. I was just wondering if there's any parity comparisons with the private sector, because I know that it's not a straight wash from government to private business, but there are some jobs that cross there in both. So my question is, you know, in government, we have to be careful not to outpace the private sector as well, and kind of use that in it to do any of these diagrams or any of your analysis cover what pay is in the private sector and how government compares to those?
It can be done. We have not explored that vehicle, that avenue lately. Most of the time, my public employees or clients are really backing away, trying to toe the line with them, with the private sector. Private can't keep up with public, with the total compensation picture. So they do run a fast pace and win the race. A lot of those key private environments, construction is a big one. Probably noticed that here when you've had operators jump ship for a little while and go to work where we've got a lot of opportunity. Down here, you've got a lot of building going on. So has that happened? Have you been losing your equipment operators to private outfits?
It happens sometimes. You know, depends on the market.
So, and that's an ebb and flow. That kind of situation comes and goes. But I like to use the analogy that those employees that jump the fence, they get up on the fence, they see the lush green on the other side, they take a face dive off, and it's painted concrete. It's not what they thought they were going to hit. So the reality checks circle back, and most of the time, those employees want to come home. They want to come back. You had that happen? Anyway, so good question. Can we do it? Yes, we can explore the private environment. At your direction, we could go there.
The reason I asked that is that when we were considering compensation, there was questions about where we aligned with the private sector, because I think there's some responsibility there, and it may be worth a conversation in the future to try to flesh that out just a little bit and see, because of course we base our rates on competitors in our area, you know, for jobs and that, and I realize that. But it also would be good to have just kind of a relationship understanding of what that looks like for the private sector as well.
You have a list of the private employers that are of key interest. That would be a definite exercise that could be pursued.
Thank you.
That was the same question I had, so thanks, Councilman.
I have a couple that, and maybe you can weigh in a little bit. One of them is the private sector isn't as forthcoming with their wage data as the public sector has to be because of transparency. So sometimes it's tough to get that information. And then the other thing that we run into is with a lot of our jobs, there are some that have a private sector translation, but like you're talking about a firefighter, a police officer, a building inspector, they just don't, there isn't the same job in the private sector. And so sometimes it's tough to say what would be a comparable private sector job to this. And so there are some that we absolutely compete with the private sector, and there are some that just don't have a competitive, you know, where we're trying to, the defensible wage, it's really good to look at, but sometimes it's tough to compare across the board. But
Workforce Services can sometimes help us out in that way. They have that relationship with the private environment. We can spot check, but again, the challenge is getting accurate, believable kinds of data. You know, managers, if you know owners of these businesses, you might have a an entrance into a door that we don't.
I think it'd be probably fair to just say, maybe there's a sampling of 5 or 7 jobs or something that would most directly correlate and out with those instead of trying to do it, across the board, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good approach.
So
They are high priority and high profile jobs.
I think it'd be not the high profile ones, it would be the low level ones would be easier to check. Because the high profile ones, like a city manager, is way different here than in a private. How do you compare that, But like an operator, there's an operator in the construction field and there's an operator here. One works for the city, one doesn't. Those are the ones I see that we could spot check. I like that idea of spot checking.
They
And
have the same requirements in terms of operating, so forth, if they're going to continue work that way.
My point earlier that we did see, there was a time when we would hire operators and we would train them, we would get them their CDL, and then they would immediately go private sector because they could make more money running a bulldozer for a excavation company than they could for the city. And so we always have to balance that because we probably won't be able to pay them what private sector is when they're really ramped up and running, but there's those jobs are more consistent. So we try to go for more money.
kind of stems into, typically in the private sector, you give them more money, but it's less benefits, like you mentioned. When you look at compensation, you said above their base pay were about 40%. But what are other cities? Like, what is St. George? What is Hurricane? What is their base pay? Because I know we have the better insurance than them. We provide more for our employees, which I love to do. We got to consider that as well. If we're paying a better insurance for our employees, how it compensates how we compete.
We have the tools to answer that question inside the TechnologyNet website. We have a couple hundred or more localities, city, county, special districts in the state that are chipping in, but that's one of the things that they share are all of the features of their benefits and their costs. So we could run a report and you could see how you fare in relationship to the target group.
You're certainly not done yet. What other questions, council, do you have for Mike?
Did you want to show them TechNet a little bit and kind of how, so now we have a job, we have created a job description, we have valued that job, and then I kind of wanted you to show them how we go about actually putting together the compensation for that position.
This is a report that comes out of TechNet. Let's see if it timed me out or not over here. It did not. So here, I have logged into our TechNet site as Washington City. And here are all of the jobs that have been matched by Ruth and shared with the rest of our TechNet world. And we have the ability to create what-ifing scenarios here with places of interest, and these are referred to as entity groups. Every number out here tells you how many places are associated with that particular search and query. And then we can look at jobs one at a time or multiples. Here's all city jobs in a single report attached right here. If I were to select that edit feature in here and I have this entities to the left, and if I click on that, that tells me everybody in our system that's matched on that job. So it's not, and it's Utah, Idaho, New Mexico, Kansas, Missouri, Maryland, Virginia. It's anybody that's been attached to it. So maybe helpful, maybe not. But once we have created the jobs of interest and attached those to places of interest, we run this report. And the one that was just illustrated here was this advanced comparison detailed, but I can mingle and match if I take this test group right now at the top of the list of places, that's everybody in Utah. But if today we wanted to look at the planner family or group, let's see what we got there. So that planner, as it is described, don't like that one. Let's find a better one. Always fun to take a look at public safety. So we'll take a look at police. Everybody. And so here we have what everybody says they do, they provide in compensation for detective. What is helpful and useful, Councilman Coates, you had that specific interest about the benefit package. So here in this report, the benefits that are shared in this instrument are added to the average actual pay, the dollar amount plus the benefit percent amount to calculate what is shown here as the total compensation value. So you get some of these jobs come out pretty healthy with that total comp picture. If we move down into, here's the police chief. We've got everybody in the world here on this one, so it looks pretty. It's enough to look at, but it shows the average starting pay for police chief, maximum starting averages, current incumbent average pay, and it shows you in relationship to the market in this report. In this case, on this specific job, the individual is a little over 8% behind the average of his peer group. See what we have for the rank and file. Do you have a job family, officers 1s, 2s, and 3s? I forget, Ruth. Okay, so we'll skip this one. We're going to go down to entry-level officer. So here is everybody's response to that. The average starting rate is 54.5, and the actual average current pay of those individuals is 66 something, and yours is at 68. So in this case, you're almost 3% better off in your practice and ability to attract on that broader market picture. So that's healthy, that's informational. Entry level, working level, full performance officer would be the 1, 2, 3, but you're 2 in this instance. The average current pay, it looks like you're also leading the pack on that one.
So when you say leading the pack by 3% or whatever the percent, that's above average. That's not,
So the average.
not over, the high point of what would be considered average.
This is strictly a mathematical average on these data players.
Does it show what the top of the mark is and the low of the mark is? I'm having a hard time seeing it, so.
So we've got the starting average pay here on this column, minimum. And this is midpoint, and this is the average maximum of the pay plans. Your starting rate minimum was 55, and the max is currently 83.8 on Officer 2. See the average actual current pay of people occupying those jobs in these other columns. And
So this is an average of this sampling. So I see Lehigh, Summit, Vernal. I mean, was there a method to the sampling that you chose for this report?
the method is pretty simple. It is that they have contributed data to the TechNet system.
So I think this is important to talk about. What I think we're seeing here, we're not we're not looking at individual numbers for this is because he's taking everybody who contributes, right? And that's the real question that I want to drill down to in our compensation policy is what do we want to use? Because obviously, like you say, a police officer in Kanab may not be a good comp for Washington City. And so the two questions I really want us to dig into as a council that I think we still need to, I hope everybody got a chance to read through the compensation policy that was in the packet. But the real two questions are, number one, where do we want to be in the market? And number two, what are we comparing against? Because when he says they're 3% over, we're saying for everybody. So Salt Lake City might be skewing that on the high end, or Park City, and then, that's what I was say who's on the low end, but there are some other cities on the low end that are skewing us that way. So when we say we're 3% above, that's not 3% above the market we're looking at necessarily. That's 3% above the average of every city that's included in the sample, which is not necessarily who we compete in.
And when you throw in an enterprise,
Is there a way to do a sampling that you can do
Yes,
for local? Because I think you've ran reports before on that.
there is. And so,
Done a lot of comparisons with just looking at cities of our same size and looked at that number as well as just our local number, because those are the groups that we wanted to be comparative to. We don't want to be compared to Salt Lake City. We're not Salt Lake City. We don't want to be, compared to Kanab. So that's why we've kind of looked at those two main groups to be compared to.
so the way that we've written this policy at this point, I guess I'd love to hear discussion or comment on it, is we say we want to be at the competitive with the average pay of the current market salary data. So the thing that means is that there will always be people that paid more and there will always be people that paid less, and we want to be in the middle. We want to be at that average range. And I think that that's worth a discussion, or at least some thought by the council, because there are times when we look at a position at a city, and a city will give a raise to a certain position, and then we will sometimes feel like we have to match that or we have to chase that. And what we're saying is, no, there will always be cities that make more, there will always be cities that make less, but our philosophy is we want to be average. Or do you want to be 5% above or 5% below? Or I'm also hearing, we want our total compensation to be average. So we can look at that as well. But I'd like us to nail that down, maybe not today in our discussion, but by the time we pass our compensation policy, where do we want to be sitting in the market? And then number two is, with whom are we looking at? And what I put in here right now is that the market wages will generally include local cities, which we define as typically St. George, Cedar City, Hurricane, Santa Clara, Ivins. Those are our local, because that's normally if I have a building inspector, for instance, that's the market they're looking in, and that's who we're competing against for that employee. But also cities of similar size. So sometimes we'll have a position that may not have enough local comps, or we might say, boy, we need a little bit more to help us understand what this position should really be paid. And we'll look at other places like, that are around that 30 to 50,000 residents to get our comps. So when we did the budget, we sent out some of that for, I think, department heads, and that's what we were looking at. We were looking at the local cities plus some large cities of similar size throughout the state that we feel like are good comps for Washington City. And is that where we would like to be?
what are those? I mean, we know the locals, right? We're not using Enterprise or
No,
Holly,
locals are usually Santa Clara, Ivins, St. George, Hurricane.
Who are the outliers that we're using as well?
I'd have to go back to it. We use places like Centerville and
We use Farmington.
Farmington. Yeah, there's 4 or 5 similar to us in.
You asking us to define those tonight?
No, in fact,
Because
what I'm really saying is two things. Do you like average? Average might mean that for a certain position, maybe Ivins is the leader. They're paying the most for their building inspectors, and maybe, Cedar City is lagging, and we're going to be in the middle. So that means that our building inspectors are not going to be the highest paid, but they're going to be They're gonna be average in the market, and
Where
that's,
are we right
that's where we
now?
wanna be.
Like overall? I mean, what does this graph tell us?
That was this year's,
Does this tell us that we're below average right now?
the trend line says that exactly in this instance, based on this sample survey player, you're that far below the average currently.
And is this only the salary, or does this also include the benefits for this?
Pay only.
Base pay only, so it doesn't have the benefits.
See, and I
the
think,
benefit
I think she
package.
makes a good point because our benefit package is typically a little better than others, but I think the other point too that Jeremy's making is what does this body want to use as for the sample? Like, who are our samples aside from the locals that have been mentioned? Are there some other cities? Because you might have Provo and Salt Lake and some of those that might skew it high, but then probably you also have some of these smaller communities that skew it low. And I don't know if you sample across the state or if you try to, if that's the safest bet, or if you try to, sample it more close to home and similar size.
All have visions and perceptions of the marketplace players. Who are the big players? Who are the small guys in the mix? What if, as this thought, if you surveyed the key players around the state? Because if I'm an employee working for you, I'm not going to go door knocking on little doors. The best and biggest opportunity to enhance my career growth and development, it might still be here, but it could be a number of different places. So if you took a snapshot that represented the biggest of everybody, now you can say, in relationship to them, what makes the most sense for us is to put the bar.
Do places with snow automatically notch them down? Because, I mean, we have so much to offer here that's not financial.
Well, you've got a vision, you got a perspective there. The Wasatch County folks, their philosophy was that if you're working for the county, we don't have to pay you anything. You got the best place in the world to live and work. And so you have that kind of philosophy coming out. But you have the opportunity to.
It would be for me, and I don't want to, I want the council to give their feedback, but for me on this chart here, it would be interesting if you could circulate back. I see this is a large sample. Can you stay on that page where you just were? It would be interesting for me to have some time to dive in to see if Washington is the red line right now, and if the survey kind of averages the blue line, it would be helpful for me to see where is Cedar City, where is Hurricane, Santa Clara, Ivins, St. George, and then maybe even a Farmington or an Eagle Mountain or some of those. Because to me, I think geographically and from a population standpoint, those would be helpful to see where we are. And then I think also, are we retaining good employees? Are we offering opportunities for employees to advance their careers? I mean, I think that's just as important too. And then recognizing too that we're a younger city relative to some of these, and growing quickly, which presents some unique challenges as well.
This instrument allows you to do that search and to answer that question.
Can you send some of those out to the council or have Ruth do that?
Yeah, Ruth can do that. But here in this data table, if I sorted this right now just for the exploration.
I mean, I guess you could query it down by job description or
you could, but right here, we could go down and delete.
And again, those numbers that he's showing you, these are for instructional purposes. These aren't anything that we're bringing you because these are the comps that we're trying to talk about today. I'm trying to keep this more philosophical at this point. Where do we want to be? And then we'll bring you the data that supports that. But it's kind of hard to look at the entire state because they may not be where we want to be in the market.
We say, this is my opinion, is we don't want it the whole state. I mean, we can't.
I agree.
I think we should look at the ones we talked about, Hurricane Ivan, Santa Clara. I mean, Ivan's even a stretch for me because they might be an outlier because of the way that they run their city versus us, right? They have way less residents and they would rather do things way different than us is what I noticed. So it might not work, but we probably have to because they're so close and we could lose employees there, so we got to keep them in the mix. But you can't go compare a Springdale. I mean, they had totally different things like with the National Park, and so it just,
Springdale into our.
yeah, I'm just, as an example of one that is hard to utilize, because I know sometimes they are way different in pay versus us, but they do different things, and I don't know how that works, but I guess what I'm saying is I agree with the method that I'm kind of hearing, is that do the locals, pick 4 or 5 similar-sized cities across the state of Utah, Farmington, those, and that's how I would like to see at least the comparison. And then when it comes to the average, I mean, I want to obtain quality employees, the best employees we can, but we also got to realize we can't always compete with some of the other cities that are high. I don't want to be the top. I think it's hard to be, I mean, I'd love to, but it's hard to do that on every job. So how do we mix it up? And just because of our size compared to other size, like, I don't think we can pay we can't compete sometimes with St. George on certain job positions based on, just because they have a bigger budget to work with.
But where we can compete, Councilman, I think, because I like what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, but in a growing city like we are in, there are also opportunities to advance into a new position, which equals a new pay grade as well. So I think that's another advantage of being here, is that there's opportunity within the organization. But I like that approach.
I also think it would be helpful to see the comparisons with the, the benefit package included, not just have it just be based upon the salary. I think that would be beneficial to kind of see that as well, because I know that makes a big difference to some people to have good benefits.
And if it doesn't, then we should match everybody else and then raise the pay. I mean, essentially, we want to find out what people want and what makes us competitive. But the mayor's right. There are reasons why people, I mean, I think all of you have careers and you don't always choose the number one highest paid thing you could possibly do. Sometimes that has other things about it that aren't very attractive. And so we have culture, we have a growing city, we have the weather that you talked about. I don't want to live in Park City, and so it's a lot, I don't care what they're paying. But I think what I'm hearing then, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes here, but we like that average, which is where we've been. That's where we've tried to be in the past. I just want to make sure it's still where we want to be. But that does mean when somebody comes and says, hey, this bring me a job in another city and say they're paying more. So yeah, that's expected. And there will also be some that are paying less, and that's expected as well. But generally, we want to be the average of, that idea of total compensation, compensation value.
One thing I
Bring
have
apples
to look at is what is that spread between the high and low on percentage? Because, I mean, the average sometimes might not work, but I don't want to be below average ever, in my opinion, but maybe we're a little above. But is that spread a percent or is it 20%? Like, I don't know.
As if there's a crazy outlier too, like maybe who's been at a city for 40 years, doing the average up, or there's somebody who, for whatever reason, is way below because they've never asked for increase, they don't want it, post-retired or something. We can always throw that one data point out too.
See, and that's what I'm seeing on these data points, is that because we're a younger city, I think we have a fair amount of newer employees on those more entry-level positions, and then we seem to have more tenure on those higher pay grade positions. I mean, that could potentially be one of the reasons.
What I'd like, Mayor, for me personally, is I'd like to have a copy of the PowerPoint and kind of go over some of the data and check and look more closely at the different cities and be able to look at some of those questions that we're having right now and kind of answer them with the data. I think that's wonderful information to base our decisions on, but I'll need more time to maybe look through it a little better.
Just for fun, I restricted this look to your market south here, and the bar moved. So instead of being 8.9% behind, you're 4.9% in relationship to this southern marketplace. And this is,
Be on the lower pay grades. If you look at the corresponding cells, there seem to be, on the lower pay grades is where we seem to be lagging a little bit.
that is true. This is where your body of employees fall within the market ranges. Yellow dots is a somebody. So you've got a couple that are outliers on both sides of the scale, which is not uncommon either.
The other thing, Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, but on the other, you were showing minimums, not actual pay. So we're talking pay ranges rather than what the actual pay is for each position. But when you move to the other, you're showing actual pay data in the min-max, or are you showing minimums there as well?
Our actual pay in relationship to the market min to max.
So the red line being the average, the blue lines being the maximum and minimum of the market. Yellow dots being actual pay. So for the most part, that's what we've been doing. We've been average of the local market using a few key cities that are similar to ours to help add some context when we need it. And I still think that works really well. I just want to make sure that's still the direction. And obviously it's a work meeting, so we're just having a discussion, and I want to make sure I'm going the right way.
I like what you're saying, Jeremy. But when we say market, in this meeting, we're talking just government, right? And I like what Councilman Ivy talked about. I'd like to see a little bit of effort to compare with private sector, just to make sure we're not out of kilter one way or another with the private sector. So that's a big thing to me. That's really important. And we know from our past discussions that that was a big deal for me. And so for me, that's kind of a big deal. I understand this stuff, and I agree with what you're saying. I'd like to see I would always like to, if we're gonna err on a larger sample size, I think there's safety in a larger sample size. I agree with some of the things that you're saying, but I would rather have a larger sample size of like size cities, because I think there's safety in a larger sample size. But anyway, if there was some way to incorporate comparing to the private sector somewhat, that would help me.
Thank you.
A comment about the benefit side of things. There are some challenges. The level of benefit, type of benefit, and cost of benefit, as each individual entity across the state has to deal with their own experience. And if they're experience rated, if you have a high utilization on some plan, you're going to get premium adjustments are going to spike. And so all of that data back, we don't know exactly where and why those costs are being tacked on to those different players at the pace they are.
Councilman Belliston, what are your thoughts on this? You've been down this road before. What are you seeing?
I think, I'm with Jeremy, right? This is a policy to kind of stay out of the weeds. I think it's easy to get caught in the weeds, right? But this really is kind of setting those positions. I just keep on the 50,000 foot level, and if we can set the policy where the staff work from that, makes things better. But
Jeremy, what else are you looking for from the council then, as you set that policy and you've taken the feedback with the sample and with, am I hearing that we want to be safely in the middle?
I think it's been a good discussion, and I think I have what I need to move forward with it. And we'll bring it back for the council. We'll get some more data and keep talking about it. So this isn't anything that's a huge rush either. We just want to make sure that we're doing it properly and that we pass something that then we can use as we put together our budgets to help us inform where that compensation should be.
Are there any other particular points of your
No.
briefing document that you want to review at this time, or anything else
anybody
you
have-
want with Mike here?
I just went through A of the compensation policy. Did anybody have any other questions about any other sections of it? I think it's fairly straightforward. You talk about compression, and when we hire people, we try to bring them in at the minimum. Credit for experience, years of experience, or certifications they may have to start above the minimum. I think all of that is pretty straightforward.
I had a question on C. You know, when we're talking initial appointment, you know, one that comes to mind is when we hired in the power department, Wayne. He had, you know, 25 plus 30 years of experience before we hired him. Does that, on that initial appointment, mean that he's at or below the midpoint? I guess I was just kind of curious how that would really work, because he is so well qualified, but it's not a director position.
Yeah, anybody would still fall within their range for their position. So the most we're gonna be able to do is within that range. Ruth can talk to it a little bit. We will take that into account when somebody has vast amounts of experience.
So
to
even
place
with
them in
all
market.
the experience, we never bring anyone in over a midpoint. Midpoint's kind of the maximum, so you've got anywhere from that 80, 90 to 100% with all your experience. We're not gonna bring you in above that.
So you come in at 90 in that case?
So you could come in at 90, you could come in at 100%. There are a couple of positions that do come in, you know, at that midpoint, and then their progression slows from there.
So you said 100% could be the midpoint. I don't understand that.
Midpoint, so if you're looking at a pay range, you have your starting range,
Okay.
you have your mid-range, and you have your maximum. We call that an 80, 100%, 120%. When you hit 120%, you're redlined, you're done. You've kind of hit the top of your pay scale, and that's as far as you can go.
Based on your grade? Based on the
your
pay grade?
Now, if you're shifting positions or promoting upward, your grade's gonna shift, your comp ratio comes down, your range is different now. And so, you know, there's always that room for growth when promoting, but if you're staying in the same position, you're hired in, normally you're hired at that 80 percentile. That's entry level, we don't know what we're getting with you, you're coming in just green, or you're just coming in with
But
minimal
that could be
experience.
why in some cases, if you have newer employees without experience, that may
Correct.
show,
And that's why when you were looking at some of those charts where you've seen so many of
Right.
that lower grade that was below.
but
it's
with
because
time,
the-
they'll move up within their
Correct.
grade or move to a new grade, and
Correct.
and then it seems like for us, at least what I saw was just, it seemed like it averages out a little bit over
It
time.
does. So many of our entry-level employees, when you're talking parks, public works, they are fairly new employees. A lot of them are level ones. They haven't advanced to a 2 or 3, and they can, but it's gonna take, you know, some time and some certifications to get them there. Once they do that, they start progressing upward. But if you had just a whole team of everyone that was a level 3, you're gonna see that line would have been up much higher. The pay would have been at a much higher rate because they've got the seniority, they've got certifications. But where we are, like you're saying, we're a younger group coming in, you're gonna see that they are at that entry-level pay. So it's not so much that we're below in what we're paying our entry level, it's that they're at the entry level. Does that kind of help?
While you're here, I have another question. You know, I look and I see Blake here, our Public Works Director. There's a lot of employees there, and that's a heavy load. How are we doing with attracting and retaining some of those key positions? I'm thinking, you know, water and so forth, and, you know, streets. Are we able to attract, you know, hardworking individuals that are ready to come in? And then are we being patient and working with them as they attain their certifications and just kind of building them into those positions? How are we doing there? Are our supervisors working with them, helping them to get their feet under them and so forth?
I think we're doing okay. So we've restructured a couple of things as we move forward, knowing that people don't just live in Washington that's looking for a job. So we've had to go outside our perimeters and change some of our distance driving to get to work and to do your on-calls. Our pays are great. I think we're right where we need to be. I look weekly with St. George City to see what their entry levels are, and we're right where we need to be on our bringing in employees. We're also looking at, as soon as these employees, it's up to them to progress. You know, if they're willing to test out to a level 2, and these supervisors can take them out in the field and they can show that they have the ability to do what a level two's expectations are, and they've met that certifications right on the spot. They move in, they advance. You know, we do this.
I love that concept because I think it allows them to determine their reach their potential based on their effort.
Some are content being a level one. They're just happy coming to work every day and being a level one. And those are usually a little more elderly, not elderly, but a little bit older employees, that are looking for a career. They're just looking for work. And then you've got your younger generation looking for a career path. We want to create that career path for them.
Are there pain points that you're dealing with right now in terms of employment that the council can
So
help
when
with?
you're talking private, we've had in the past, during the summer, we've had some that have retired. We've had some that have gone to the private sector. We've had some that have taken other government jobs to our local surrounding cities at a higher level of title.
So they've moved up
So
to
some have promoted up, we weren't able to give them an advancement to the level of what they had an opportunity to take.
Conversely, have we attracted from other local entities and?
We have, so we kind of share back and forth. What a lot of times you'll find level threes that want to come over here, and we'll grab them as soon as we can. We know they've got all the certifications, they've got all the experience we're looking for. We're not going to start them down at the entry level pay,
So 2 questions, right? How many levels are there? Is there
Right
one,
now, we
two,
have a
three?
level 1, 2, 3, and our 4 is a lead role. So, and usually there's only one person in that lead role.
And you may potentially hire from the outside in a level 4
Absolutely
role,
do.
right?
If we can grab them, we do.
Hire them, they would be at the midpoint of the level 4, no more than the midpoint of the level 4 hire, correct? Okay. All right.
And usually when they're coming over from another city, first thing we ask them is, what's your pay there? Because if we can't compete with what you're making and what you expect from us, that's where we kind of look and see, is it doable? I mean, this is a valuable employee. Is it worth losing them over $500? Most likely not. It just depends on what they're bringing to the table. And if we feel that it's a valuable move, we'll make that move. But I've not had anyone come over that midpoint, but there could be that discussion at some point where we need to see, is that something that we need to really look at based upon their experience? And if so, that would be something that would go back and defer back to the management to say, how do we want to do this?
I think there's a reason that you have it, and it's a little confusing. This is a government thing, right? To think min, mid, and max. You think mid is average, and it's not. In this case, mid is your market competitive wage. So no matter what if it's a street sweeper, the market wage for a skilled, trained,
government
competent
market.
street sweeper is that midpoint, right? So when we're bringing someone in, even if they have 20 years of experience, they're that midpoint, right? That's the competitive wage. So often we're not bringing them in more. We need to look at it and say, is there something we're missing in the wage that we can't attract competent employees at that market competitive wage? And normally we can. That's why we don't bring people in above that.
Henry, can I ask you a question? This is for setting wages and 50,000 foot level on how we want to have our policy, right? But part of the issue that we were struggling with in the budget process was an annual bump. So does that need to be written into this on how do we need to look at that from a different viewpoint and write that into this? Or I agree with this, with what's been presented on how we pick positions pay, right? But as we're looking at some of those
So under
adjustments.
B1, it talks about cost of living versus market. It says adjustments to the salary schedule may be determined periodically through analysis of market trends in comparison to the cost of living. And we either use market survey or we can use a cost of living index to try to determine that. And that's still a component of our yearly budgeting. We would look at that and say, if the cost of living went up 2%, then we would like to incorporate that 2% as part of our compensation for all employees, because essentially the cost of living went up 2%, so we want to keep them equal. And then we would look at the market data to see, are there certain positions that have become out of market? So yeah, it'll be both. We'll look at things that we do for everybody, but also, is there a certain position or positions that have dropped below average or dropped above average? And do we need to make some adjustments to that?
We're up against a hard stop. We've got 2 minutes. Council, any final thoughts for Mike and staff? Ruth, Jeremy, Mike, any final word to the council?
Bosses.
Ruth, anything, you've got us, anything you want us to hear while you're here?
If you guys have any additional questions or anything you need clarified, you know, I can work with Mike, we can put together something for you and.
Yeah, we'll take your feedback now and incorporate it and bring it back. We'll have future discussions. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. All right, that's the final item for the workshop session. We'll call for a motion to adjourn until 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Bellison, second by Councilman Coates. All in favor? Workshop meeting is adjourned. Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight for our regular city council meeting. We had our workshop session and then we broke for just a minute, so we're back in for this meeting. This is the meeting where we have action items, where we vote, where the council votes and takes action. So we're grateful that you're all here this evening. Today is Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. We are in the city council chambers. We so appreciate our partnership, our relationship with the Interfaith Council. And so it's my privilege to invite Sister Dana Moody to come forward. Sister Moody, and welcome to say a few words, introduce yourself if you would like, and offer the invocation.
Thank you for the opportunity to do this. We appreciate your service, all of you. Our Father in heaven, we come before thee this beautiful afternoon, and we thank thee humbly for this free nation that we live in, that affords us with the opportunity to meet and assemble and to govern ourselves and to give us the freedom to worship thee in our way. We're very thankful for this mayor and city council, for their service. We're grateful for the others in this city that serve, the fire department, the police officers, any other civil servants. And we pray for all of them and their families, that they can be blessed with protection and with good health. We pray that they can be blessed with vision for this community and discernment and inspiration to lead and guide in this time of growth in a manner pleasing to thee. We're so grateful for those that settled this community, and we realize the privilege it is for us to be here. And we say this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. You know, it's always such a pleasure to start with a prayer. And it's interesting, we are able to rotate through various denominations, and I believe Sister Moody is with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so we appreciate her. It's been recommended to me that I put Andy Stevens on the spot to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Andy.
Please rise and follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Andy. And then before I call for an approval of the agenda, I'd just like to welcome our friend and representative from Senator Mike Lee's staff who joined us tonight, Gary Webster. Thank you for being here. I asked if he had anything to report from the Senate, from Washington, D.C., and he said they're not in session right now. He just came to be involved. So we appreciate you. Council, we do not have need to go to closed session. You can thank me later. Thank me now. So with that said, I'll look to one of you to make a motion to approve this agenda.
So moved, Mayor.
I have a motion by Councilman Coates.
Second.
Second by Councilman Belliston. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. The next item is just a few announcements. Remember Labor Day on Monday, September 2nd. City offices will be closed. And then on Wednesday, September 11th is, I believe we call it Patriot Day. So, find an opportunity. I know that the City of St. George does a really nice celebration. I think they're doing theirs in the evening, is at 7:30 at Town Square. And I know in years past, and I think this year as well, the American Legion will retire some flags here locally at Veterans Park in that evening. But we support St. George in celebrating, or maybe even more than celebrating, remembering 9/11, and then they support Washington City with Veterans Day. So that's kind of the agreement that we have. Council, those are the only things I can think of between now and our next meeting. Am I missing anything? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is declarations of abstentions and conflicts. Is there anything to declare tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to a proclamation. But before I do this, I'd like to invite my friend Karen Schumann with the Daughters of the American Revolution should come forward again this year and just speak a little bit to about Constitution Week and your organization, and then we'll go ahead and read that proclamation. Karen.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, I'm with the Daughters of American Revolution, the color country, and 237 years ago, after 100 days of intense conversation and deliberation, our Constitution was signed by 39 men at approximately 4 p.m. in Pennsylvania at the State House. And this Constitution established the fundamental laws and principles that would govern our newly formed nation. And as we move forward in time, the Daughters of American Revolution became acutely aware that the significance of these bold steps taken were not recognized. And so at that time, they decided to take serious action by petitioning Congress with a resolution that would take serious action by petitioning Congress with a resolution that would set aside September the 17th through the 23rd to not only observe but commemorate the adoption of our U.S. Constitution. That resolution turned into a public law, number 915, signed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on August the 2nd of 1955. So that's kind of the background of what the Daughters of Revolution have done as far as recognizing and then we usually have the mayors from each one of the cities do a proclamation, which you will be doing too.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have some little constitutions that maybe each one of you all, if you could pass them out to your people on that side and him some on this side. So at least each one of you may have a constitution and be able to recognize it as the important thing that we have in our government today.
That. Karen, thank you. It matters what you're doing. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you. I'm going to read this proclamation, but before I do, I just want you, maybe just each of you to take a minute, just take a minute to think about what your life would be like if this document, the Constitution of the United States, wasn't adopted. Maybe take a moment just to kind of consider the freedoms that we enjoy as a result of that. I'll go ahead and read the resolution. Washington City Proclamation. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law. And whereas September 17th, 2024 marks the 237th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and to its memorable anniversary and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate it. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore, I, Cress Staley, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of Washington City, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the great seal of Washington City, Utah, to be affixed this 28th day of August of the year of our Lord, 2024. All right, you have plenty of notice of Constitution Week coming up. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of approval of minutes. This is consideration to approve the minutes from the City Council meeting of 8/14/24. I'll call for a motion on that item.
Motion to approve that item, consent agenda.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Casperson to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Second by Councilman Ivy. All in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Next item is award of bid. This is consideration to award the bid for the 2000 South Reconstruction Project to JP Excavating in the amount of $1,611,005. I'd like to invite our Assistant Public Works Director, Andy Stevens, to come back to the pulpit. Good to see you, Andy.
Twice in one day. Mayor, Council, thank you. On August 20th, we opened bids for a reconstruction project of 2000 South, with JP being the low bidder. And this project will go from 20 East to roughly Merrill Road. So right where St. George started their microservice, that's where we're starting. We'll go clear through 20 East. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Council, don't go easy on him. I haven't so far.
I was gonna just comment that I noticed that this grouping is a lot more tighter, or a lot more tight than we've had lately. It seems lately a lot of the bids are just, all over the place, and this is kind of a tight grouping. I've noticed there's one that's a little bit higher, but the rest of them are pretty tight. Is there any reason for that, do you think?
So St. George City's been doing a lot of really similar projects to this, and throughout St. George, they did out in Fort Pierce and a few other spots. So it's all the same contractors, so that the engineer pretty much knew what it was gonna cost because he's been doing all the jobs in St. George, and then it's all the same guys. And they've all been doing this similar type project in St. George City, so.
Kind of nice, so thank you.
HMA, the asphalt,
Yeah, hot mix asphalt.
and they don't do that on a square footage, they're now doing it on ton or cubic yard?
Yeah, and that's, Mainline Engineering just has that figured out per ton for the 5 inches asphalt over that square footage.
Okay.
Any additional questions for our Assistant Public Works Director? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the bid.
I'll make a motion, we approve the bid in $1,611,005 to JP Excavating.
I have a motion by Councilman Coates, second by Councilman Belliston. All in favor?
Aye.
The bid is awarded to JP unanimously. Thanks, Andy. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. The mayor and council received 3 online public comments prior to the meeting. We appreciate the input on this item coming up. As I typically say, this is an opportunity. Public hearings are an opportunity for the council to listen and consider additional public feedback. After I open the public hearing, any wishing to speak to this specific item, please remember to state your name for the record and to address the mayor and council as such. Please try to make your comments relevant, concise, not repetitive to something that's already been said. Most well-spoken comments in public settings can be made within about 2 to 3 minutes. Clapping or yelling after public comment is not appropriate in a public meeting. And council, as usual, I turn to you and ask for you to listen and take notes, and council and staff will address any questions or items that come up after I close the public hearing. Item 7A, this is a public hearing and consideration to approve height waiver HW-24-03 for the St. George. Father Michael, I hope I say this right, Antiochian, you can correct me later if I'm wrong, Orthodox Christian Church, located at 1570 North Coral Canyon Boulevard. Our city planner, Eldon Gibb, will present to the council on this item. Mr. Gibb.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The location of this height waiver, as previously stated, is 1570 North Coral Canyon Boulevard. The applicant is requesting a waiver from the maximum height of buildings allowed for a structure in a residential zoned property, which is 35 feet. The applicant is seeking approval to extend the height of their proposed new church with the associated dome and the cross. As shown in the exhibit, there are 2 areas exceeding the 35 feet. The first dome is situated at 45 feet 10 inches, with the peak of the cross at 49 feet 10 inches. And then second, and the larger dome, which is situated 53 feet, with the peak of the cross at 61 feet 9 inches tall. You can see that dark black line there. That's the 35-foot line. So everything above that darker hashed black line is above the 35 feet. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Council, questions for Eldon?
Yeah, I have a couple. On the last few LDS churches that have been approved, what are the heights that we've approved?
They range anywhere, depending on if it's a stake center or a 3 or 4 ward building, from 67 to 72 to the top of the spire.
Okay. And then this might be more of a Jeremy question. What's the, I guess, state statute or federal statute when it comes to religious buildings?
I'm glad you asked me and not Thad, who's probably
That too. I'm sure he probably knows it as
I don't get paid enough for those type of questions.
level 30.
What John Swallow.
It's a level. I
That
think
is-
it's a 31.
That is
actually,
not
when
an
I was paying
attribute in
attention.
my job description.
There are, and I only know this because I pretend to be an attorney sometimes, but there are some, some rules that fall with religious liberty and the exercise of religion that fall within this, but I don't know that we've spent a lot of time looking at the legal ramifications of a denial.
Yeah, there's not a federal standard for height waivers or height requirements. The reason that cities get to have codes in those categories is because they have not been preempted by federal law. There are federal protections against discrimination on the basis of religion. And so whatever your deliberation might be tonight, I just would encourage you to avoid, discriminatory discussion or rationale for decisions to be made. But otherwise, the federal government has not passed laws regarding heights of protected class buildings. And because there's no such federal standard, the local standard can be administered and applied.
I'm not asking for, justification for denial or things like that. I know that there's rules that says pretty much when it comes to a church, it can go in any zone, for any reason, pretty much, and you have to allow it, right? So I don't know really how far that goes and to what extent that goes. So I'm just curious, that's all.
And our own rules reflect that.
Mayor, I'll just add, Washington City's been over the years I've been here, always been open to entertain, whether it didn't matter which religion it was. I remember, in fact, they never did build it, but the church off of Buena Vista came in and wanted a 100+ foot tall cross, and the council granted that. They never did build it, but I mean, the city council here, since I've worked here, has always been open policy for that, so.
I get that, and I think that, if I'm wrong, this has been zoned as a church site in the PCD for a long time.
Exception of Coral Canyon.
But they never identified what faith.
Right. Up on 30 years, I think in 2026, I think it was 1996, Coral Canyon, or 98, one of the two, but it's always been designated as a church site, so.
I'm just asking questions that
You're good.
Danny, so thank you.
I think those are good questions, Councilman, and more clarifications for you, because I know you understand it well. But for the council and for the public, as the councilman talked about, churches can go in any zoning. In respect to this item tonight, and I'm going to open the public hearing momentarily, we're talking about a height waiver. So they would be required to obtain a height waiver whether they're in a PCD or in straight zoning.
Yeah, because the zone they're in is the 35-foot maximum.
So this would be treated just, if this weren't in Coral Canyon, it would be treated the same way in any neighborhood across the city?
Yeah, if it was across the street from us today or there. Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks.
Council, any additional questions for staff? If not, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this item to please come forward and share your input on this particular item.
Hi, my name is Lori McGee, and this is really out of my comfort zone. I'm scared and shaking. I try to mind my own business. I've lived out in Coral Canyon now for 5 years and absolutely love it. In those 5 years, I have never had any problems with my neighbors or the HOA. I have heard from my neighbors, if you have too many leaves or you've got different paint on your garage, you're gonna get what they call the nasty gram. Fortunately, I have not had this. I am going to share a wall with this church, a back wall. And I guess my problem is it's just way too tall. If it was, I guess, a straight up type of skinny little thing, it would be okay, but the height is coming with this round onion type zone, which is going to be very visible, and it just doesn't go with our residential area. We are kind of a southwest decor, and we are going to be neighbors with them, and we would like to keep the peace, but several of us are upset by this height. And I have not heard the reasoning why that we have to go with this height. Could they go back to the drawing board and, I don't know. So it scared me, but I did it.
You did just fine. Thank you, Lori. And after the public comment period, I'll invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to answer some of those questions as well, just for the record. Thank you for your comment. Who else would like to come forward and speak to this item?
I think some of you are familiar with me with the Arts Council, but as a resident.
And just state your name one more time for those who aren't. We all know you, and we know Bill. So.
Okay, good memory. Glenda Caskey, and I live in Coral Canyon. Our thought is, we've lived there 17 years. Yes, the lot has been available and zoned for church property. I don't know if all of you have been out there to see this, but the extreme height just doesn't seem appropriate for the small area that is going to be built in. We're very concerned. I'm surprised there's not more people here tonight. And I love the idea of having a church there. It's beautiful architecture, but the height to me would be overwhelming to everybody in the neighborhood.
I'm Bill Caskey. I belong to Glenda. And like she said, we've lived there a long time. And if you just look at the pictures here, we just drove by there on the way in here, by the way. The elevation of that lot is actually a little higher than the homes that are around it. If you look on the very left where you see the streetlights and then you see the shadow of the tree about halfway up there, that's a home right there. The tree is in their front yard. There's homes just beyond the church also. One of the things that's really nice about our neighborhood is it's all one-level homes. There's no two-story homes. I'm not a designer, but I'm guessing that they're probably maybe what, 20 to 25 feet at the height of the roof. So I understand that it's 35 foot is the maximum, so this is going to just tower over those homes, it really is. I'm fine with having a church there. In fact, I think it's gonna be very nice. I just don't think it needs to be that tall. And when I looked at the other drawings, I think it's 3 stories. And again, most of our homes are 1-story homes. So we don't live right there, but I feel for my neighbors that they're gonna be, what, 50 yards from that very, very tall church there.
We're only a few blocks away.
Yeah, we aren't too far away, but anyway, I'd just like them to think about maybe redesigning it, not quite that tall, keep it to the 35 feet. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda, Bill, appreciate those comments. Would anyone else like to comment on this particular item on the height waiver? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll invite the applicant and the applicant's representative, if applicable, to come forward and maybe talk a little bit about some of the comments that were made and anything else you'd like to present to the council. And Father Michael, really the pressing question is, how do we pronounce that? I think I got it close, but not quite on the Antiochian.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. I don't think
Okay.
that's something that will probably be included in a sign at the front.
We're just going to call it
Simply,
St. George Orthodox?
Orthodox Church is more than sufficient.
Well,
to describe
I
it.
actually like that. I think that would be great to cut both St. George and Antioch. Anyway, Orthodox Christian Church would be great. Go ahead.
So my name is Father Michael. Hello, everybody. I am the head priest of this community, and have been so for the past year. And I had the tremendous honor of having my parish council request of me to get this project lifted off the ground and really create a church community for the growing Orthodox faithful in town, which I'm really delighted is growing swiftly, and there's plenty of people. This property was purchased before my involvement in the community, a few years before I was assigned here. And I'm very pleased, actually, with how things have been developing with this project. And in fact, I can just share a little bit the reasoning, the rationale behind why build this way, why build so high, why build so grand, why build so uniquely. And for us, it's consistent with our Christian heritage, looking into traditional Byzantine architecture and iconography. This is really consistent on a global scale with all Orthodox believers, whether they're in Russia, or they're in Greece, or they're in the United States, or they're in Latin America. We build aesthetically and beautifully and grand because that's consistent with our confession that our worship of God and who God is supreme and grand and worthy of this level of financial investment, of this footprint on the local region, to express the grandeur of both God's majesty as well as our recognition of it and our willingness to praise him rightfully. And it's not just aesthetically pleasing for the sake of it being beautiful. There is so much deep historical, symbolic imagery at work. And so when you ask questions, not you, but if someone were to ask a question, why do you need a dome? Why do you need a cross at the top? Why does it need to be shiny? And I could, piece by piece, articulate the historical significance behind the symbolism in every single component, that the cross is the message of Christ's victory over the evil one and over death for the deliverance of the human race, and thusly it has to be supreme. It has to be grand. If we were to sort of minimize that, it's a commentary on how we're sort of diminishing the impact of that theological truth in the world. Similarly, with the representation of the dome, it being the heavens. You think this might look beautiful on the outside. I hope you do. But it's really nothing until you start going on the inside of these churches and you see what we're putting up there in the dome, Christ the Almighty and his divine authority at the right hand of God the Father, overviewing the whole world, shepherding it, loving it, guiding it. And that is the seat of God, just as it's articulated throughout all the scriptures about how his throne is in the heavens and his footstool is here on earth. And that's what we're meant to represent when we're on the ground level in front of this fantastic big dome. So this isn't a justification or a hardline defense saying I'll never change my mind on things. But what I'd like to share is that the Christian heritage for thousands of years at this point, why we have built churches so in such a grand scheme and a grand image, is that it's a reflection of our love and devotion towards God. So think for just a minute how it might sound, the idea of, in some ways, walk back slightly and restrict what you're doing slightly. And I'm more than happy to hear that. I'm not offended or anything like that. But for us, it's like saying, can you limit your praise of God at all? And I'll never do that. But, but of course, I'm conscious of people's feelings in the neighborhood. The only counter argument I might say in the church being somewhat of an obstruction to houses is, I don't entirely understand what sort of view we'd be protecting. It's just an empty lot with a hill at that side. And so the people who are on this north side, closest to where I'm pointing the bottom left corner, they're looking at an empty lot with a hillside in the background. There's not exactly the views of Zion in the opposite direction, or a beautiful mountain range. And the other houses to the east are, forgive me if my directions are wrong, but are their backyards. And again, they have a 6-foot-high wall there, and there's not necessarily a view that's being obstructed. So what I liked about the property when I initially saw it is, hopefully the height is not something that's going to somehow infringe on people's beautiful views. I know, I like views. I really enjoy views a lot. We even have a bell tower, that second dome, where people are going to be able to walk up, and it's going to be a really exciting thing, but oh, there's a beautiful view there. And I wouldn't like it if it was obstructed either. But I don't fully know if there is a view that's being protected should we not build the church to the height that it is at. Hopefully I shared a little bit behind the rationale about why to build this way, and hopefully explain, certainly don't hope it hinders anybody, that's an eyesore. But if there are more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Council, questions for Father Michael?
There will be. When it's used and how loud that is, that's a different question.
Maybe that was the question I was asking.
So when it's used, how these work typically, you might see them out in the rest of the world, different in Christian monasteries, etc. Really, it's somewhat of an image about, it's like a summoning bell. You know, the hour of the divine services is taking place. I grew up in a parish a lot like this, and it didn't just have one bell, it had more than 5 of them. And how they work really is they have a very simple rhythm that honestly isn't capable of projecting its sound beyond the scope of a parking lot. And it's never really used at any other time aside from like 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
So Sundays for services, not throughout the week, every hour on the hour type of.
No,
right?
we're not.
That's how we do our bell downtown, Councilman.
City bell, the neighbors love it here, but.
Yeah, some people mistakenly look at me and think I might be some sort of imam somewhere, but imams wear very different clothing than I do. No, it's not an hour on, you know, it's like when you're in town and the bell strikes noon. And you're walking around thinking, man, I'm really disturbed that the bell is striking noon to tell me it's noon. No, it's meant to tell you it's 10 o'clock, Sunday morning, the services take place, and it's not meant to really be loud enough to where you're blocks away and you're gonna be hearing this sort of thing. It's a bell that maybe is bigger. Some of them can be fit in my own hands. It's not the Liberty Bell.
On the dome, I assume the windows around it are to allow light in. Is there, you know, a level up there, pathway up there? Or?
No, there are no levels up there. And for things like the bell tower, those would be windows that can open and close too. So it was a really loud bell. Close those windows so it really muffles that sound.
That's fine. I'm just curious for impact, right? So if the neighbors, you know, obviously, you know, there's some of the neighbors might look at that and think, well, are they going to be looking down in me in my yard? Well, the reality is there's not offices up there.
Have you ever Googled an Orthodox church before? No. All right, you know what to do tonight.
Come on, Councilman, now.
Any other questions?
Councilman Henderson.
Mayor, may I? We don't have a full set of plans, we just have some elevations, but is there, it looks like there might be a courtyard of some kind?
Yes.
And then I'm just curious, maybe briefly tell us a little bit about what the interior might look like. Just,
Of the church?
yeah, I mean, just, is it gonna be like dark wood and stained glass, or?
Describe the church, the gateway, and a little bit.
Yeah, so we believe in that. We have a sort of a three-phased plan that incorporates three different buildings. One of them is not listed right there, but it's essentially it functions as like a parish hall, you know, after church service, fellowship, and venues for sort of events that we're having, things like that. And what you see next to that is, you know, this smaller adjacent building, and it's meant to be multi-purposed. It's supposed to combine worship and social plus administrative uses. So it has a built-in chapel itself where we can do services, offices for administration like myself, and classrooms for our students and things like that. And like you said, this picture doesn't perfectly show that courtyard right in the front, but we want a place that is conducive to spending time outside, enjoying the lovely weather and things like that. Aside from that, there's no particular events or purposes that take place there. It's for people to have a nice, pleasant experience as they're walking into church and out of church and kind of socializing together. And on the interior of churches, largely for what I envision for this parish is to have a kind of on the floor and on some of the sacred artwork pieces to be marble based, like having a marble floor. There can be some wooden seating at times, but it's largely hollow on the interior, and what's called a nave, the central place of a Christian temple. You go inside, and that's where all the people are gathered together, and surrounded you is all of this iconographic imagery. Like I said, a really good way to, it's hard for me to articulate it, but if you Google what an Orthodox church typically looks like, they're universally, they all share a standard together, so that I could go to a church in Japan that's Eastern Orthodox, and they will follow the same layout, and they will incorporate the same components and pieces that you're going to see in this one too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Seeing none. Council, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the public, you've heard from the applicant. Now is your opportunity to discuss this amongst yourself, and I'm happy to entertain a motion when you're ready as a body.
One thought I've had, Mayor, while we're sitting here is we do have Google Maps. It might be instructive just to pull up a street view and do a circular view to.
Drew, can you get there? Get right on that corner where that lot is. I think you're already driving that way, aren't you? Does that help? You've probably all driven out there. And there's interchange, or the intersection. Can you turn back to the west a little bit there, and let's look at it from that? There you go. And down that way. right there off Coral Canyon. Okay, council, this is your opportunity to, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the residents, you've heard from the applicant. This is your opportunity to discuss this further. This is for a height waiver.
Can you go back to the building, the exhibit that shows the building heights? We're having you go back and forth. Can you go to the other, yeah, that one. So really the building itself, the only part that's going above it is the dome and the cross. And I drove this area, excuse me, and went up the street and saw the LDS Church, and then saw the area that this will be. And I like that it's more closer to the road, kind of away from the homes there. And while I can understand their concerns, I kind of see this as the same, request that we've seen with other churches, the LDS churches that we've seen. And so I'm supportive of approval of this height waiver.
Thank you for your comments. Further comments, further discussion?
Mayor, if I could, we don't have dimensions. We have height dimensions on what we have here, but I scaled it out from the height dimensions, and that dome is about 30 feet wide, and I think the other one's about 15 feet wide. So really, there's a very small portion of the building that's above 35 feet, and I can sympathize with the residents. I had a church built directly behind my house. I share a back wall with a church, and it's every bit as tall as this one. And I was kind of questioning it when they first started building it, like, oh, I'm gonna have this big thing in my backyard, but that was 25 years ago, and the church has turned out to be a really good neighbor. To be honest, I mean, a very good neighbor. I would prefer to have the church in my backyard than other homes, to be honest. So I think, I'm in favor of it. The height seems to be in line with other churches in the area, and the architecture is kind of exciting. It's kind of reminds me of one of my favorite places, Santa Barbara. It's kind of a Santa Barbara style, or Mediterranean style, and so I'm quite excited about it. So I think it's going to be a good project for the area. So,
thank you, Councilman. Further comments, Councilman Velson?
I would say, as far as the architectural, I'm not red hot, but I could say that about 3/4 of the buildings in southern Utah. As far as my opinion goes. So different buildings creates different character. I do appreciate that, that the bulk of the church is on the north end of the lot, about as far away as you can pull it away from the home. So I think they looked at, that. And, a church is a good neighbor 6 days out of the week, right? So,
The seventh day, is that good?
It depends on your opinion.
I've got a few neighbors that are good neighbors 6 days out of the week.
No, I again, to what you brought up, Councilwoman Casperson, I kind of have a hard time looking at, the other churches that we've approved and the heights that we've approved, and looking at this one saying, well, I don't approve of that one. I think you got to be consistent with kind of past track record. And if we're okay with an LDS chapel and we're okay with a temple in the fields that's nearly 200 feet tall, then, I think.
That's not in our city, or else
It may not be in our city, but it still is close enough to our city that.
I'm just joking.
So anyway, I think it will be good to have that lot developed and people using that software instead of it just growing tumbleweeds.
Thank you, Councilman. Further comments?
My comments might be a little different than everyone else. I think the LDS ones are too tall. I think this is too tall, personally. I think you can do it with a nice building and architecture. Why do you gotta stick it up so high? I've never agreed with any of them. I think the same thing about temples too, but that's me. I like things a little more not so flashy.
Thank you, Councilman.
When I coached baseball for a few years, we'd get close to a part of a city at a ball field we'd never been at, and we'd start looking for the lights along the tall poles to be able to guide us into the ball field. And And I wonder if maybe the churches like those tall steeples and domes, because it's a reminder to people what that building is and what it represents. I'm very sympathetic to the citizens here tonight that are here discussing, you know, the possible or potential negative impacts to your neighborhood. You know, I really tried to listen and understand what that is. But, you know, when I think of this building and the benefit that people could achieve by going there, the solace or the peace that they can achieve, I hope that if this passes, that it'll be accepted and that there will be a good feeling towards everyone, because it's certainly not an easy decision. Anytime you look at potential negative impacts to a community or neighborhood, you have to really consider those, because those are very important to our quality of life. But I do appreciate the conversation tonight, and this isn't a real easy decision, but maybe that's all I really have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll turn to you now, Council, for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the height waiver U24-03 for the St. George Orthodox Christian Church, or do I need to? Okay. Located at 1570 North Coral Canyon Boulevard.
You've heard the motion by Councilmember Casperson.
Second.
A second by Councilmember Bellison. Let's go roll call. Let's start with Councilmember Casperson.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
Coates.
Nay.
Henderson.
Aye.
Belliston.
Aye.
The height waiver is approved 4-1. And let us know when you're ready to break ground on that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a few items of ordinances. 8A is consideration to approve an ordinance amending Washington City Code Title 9-8B-6, modifying regulations, accessory buildings and structures. City Planner Eldon Gibb will present on this item. Eldon.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item and the following item are the two of the same code amendments. They affect two different parts of the code, so we had to separate it and brought it.
You know what, Eldon, let me just read this next one too. We'll run these concurrently and vote separately. We'll let you just come up once. And so item 8A, I read. Item 8B, this is consideration to approve an ordinance amending Washington City Code Title 9-8B-6, modifying regulations, attached accessory shade structures. If you'll present once on both of these, and then we'll motion them out separately.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mayor. So this item, it's a continuation effort from Stewart Awnings. They submitted a code amendment last year. Planning Commission heard that. And then City Council ultimately denied that. During the Planning Commission meeting, they recommended a tiered structure system, which we have taken and support and are amending what they proposed. And I am happy to dig in deeper here or answer any questions that you would like.
Councilman Coates.
Can you just run through it?
You
I
bet.
mean, it's been a year since we've.
So staff is proposing that we scratch all of the wording of letter E, and our proposed wording includes accessory buildings and structures, including detached shade structures located in the rear yard, shall not cover more than the following. And then it is broken down into the following chart, which the first category includes R16, R18, and the R110 zoning designations. And in that, the same 30% rear yard area has stayed the same. And we've added that except when combined with an attached shade structure, the combined coverage shall not exceed 50%. So they can build a shed or garage up to 30% of their rear yard. If they want to do an additional shade structure, they can go up to 50% in that zone. The next category is R112, R115, R130, and the R140. I apologize. The first category is R16 and R18. There's three categories here. That first category includes the R16 and the R18. The next category is the R110, which states they can again go up to 30% if they want to build a detached accessory building. And if they want to do a shade structure, they can go up to 40% coverage in the rear yard. Then the last category includes the R112, R115, R130, and the R140 categories, which is maxed out at 30% of their rear yard.
Is the rear yard measured from the back of the house?
Technically, yes. Talked about this last time. I want to make sure that everybody understands that sometimes the back of the house isn't at the setback, the standard setback line. So I'm training my staff to know that if someone comes in and it's a 20-foot setback, the house is at, say, 27, so there's an extra 7 feet, they're not going to calculate that, even though it says it in the rear yard, because they technically can build in that next 7 feet without even touching this particular part of the code, okay? So now if it's detached, it's a different story. It is at 27 feet. The backyard does start from the back corners of that house on detached accessory structures. So I just want to make sure that, we understand there are attached scenarios and detached scenarios. That's why we had the two different parts of the code.
Where is it?
Rain's about ready to explode.
I know, it's actually very simple if I could just do Mr. Doodle on the screen, but I promise you,
You're really good at those charts.
I'm more than happy because I want some clarity because
it's simple. It really is. Don't think too much on this. We help them when we go to that at the 20 foot, the 27 foot. We're not going to calculate that in. They're on attached stuff. They're allowed to build that up to that setback line. I think that's where the confusion started there, Bay, is that, well, setback line is at 20 feet. If I don't put my house there, say I put it at 27, I still have 7 feet I can build on my house and meet all the standards. No, on the back or the sides. If I don't meet that yet, I can extend it without. These are things that go into the protected setback beyond in that area. That's what most of this is about.
But what we talked about, that's what Councilman Henderson was asking, is where are you measuring from? And if you're telling me, like my house, I set it back at 25 feet just because it was on the corner and it lined up better. So you're saying I can count that 5 feet in the front of my house as part of?
No, because these are the side and the rear yards.
Okay, so I don't know why that even comes into play then. Why did that come up? Like, wouldn't it?
Oh, because that's why we're here tonight. And that they brought it originally is because they brought attached shade structures in. And some because the homes didn't reach there, and they didn't tell us that's why they brought it until halfway through the whole thing. I said, I could have took care of that for you if you just would have come talk to me as a department head. I would have cleared up 90% of all your problems.
But we're talking detached side or rear.
Yep.
And it's 30% maximum coverage of the rear yard.
Yes.
And the setbacks are different based upon the zone, so you'll have different setbacks of where.
But that won't matter on again, don't cross the weed there. On detached, it doesn't matter. Okay, because it's a detached accessory structure from the home. It has its own standards. It's the attached ones that would cause that we could give them that 7 feet before we started calculating. That makes sense.
It doesn't. Where's the 7 feet coming from?
We're doing both, right, tonight?
My setback is 20 feet.
Yeah.
But I built my house 27 feet off of the back. I have 7 feet that I'm still allowed to build my home within the building.
Forward?
No. In the back or side yard, you got to draw your front yard out.
Used.
Yeah, if you put your house back at 25 and you wanted to add 5 feet for the front, absolutely you could, but it can't be detached.
Get that.
I think you're going to have to draw it. I think I understand what you're saying, but he's a professional. And
tell me where your confusion is.
My confusion is we keep talking about the rear and you keep bringing up the front setback. So why are we talking about the front setback?
I don't keep bringing up front setbacks. I'm talking about if my house if the setback is at 20 feet in the rear, but I built it 27 feet away from my, don't go forward.
You don't
There's
count
a
the gap.
gap between the back of your house and where you could have built to originally. That's still yours to build in.
But it's not included in the rear yard
But
calculation.
when is there a 20-foot setback in the rear?
What's that? Well, that's why R10 to R40, that's the minimum. We're talking about here is that's
At R16.
That's why the R16 and 8, we're giving them more because they're smaller lots. We realize they're kind of limited. That's why we did those numbers. I hope that helps break that, why those are bigger, because they're in a smaller thing. They need more of that. That's what sounded like everybody wanted originally, so that's why we did that.
So the rear yard is calculated to the max setback that it could be at. And then you take the percentage based on that. You eliminate the gap based on where the house sits on the lot.
Detached, because now you're back there anyway. So we calculate, but then again, it's a bigger area, right? If I was 20 by 50 feet wide, I'm at 100. If I'm at 27 by that same thing, I'm now at 135.
So that makes more sense to me, Drew, than it's kind of a hybrid of what we talked about last time.
It is. It is. But I think everybody got caught on the extra feet. And I'm trying to help the citizen of Washington. That's why I'm not going to sit there and stop at, because they shorted their house 7 or 10 or whatever the foot may be. I still want them to be able to count that as usable, especially if they attach something that doesn't go against the backyard area till they actually hit a backyard that would have been at 20 feet if you built there.
So Drew, do we need to add to just put the line in there that this is the area that's outside of the buildable pad?
It kind of says that, the detached.
Buildable pad, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Instead of trying to say gap and,
right,
and you got this, and it's just the buildable pad area, we're talking setback.
Yeah, and that would only apply on the attached, right? Detached, it's a whole scenario. It's a separate building. You have those standards you meet. So,
but what you're saying is that you get to utilize the 50%. I'm just gonna say we'll do the max cover of 30% of the rear yard. You calculate into the setback too, right?
It's all calculated, yeah.
Okay, so
now if they had 3 feet, I wouldn't count that on that 50, right? I would take that out to help them get the higher percentage.
Detached building, it potentially has different setbacks than what the original structure had, and it has different distances from the structure that has.
Yes.
Understand.
Drew, instead of having this conversation with every applicant, do we need to put it in there that just says that setback or this calculation is defined as the area in the
outside of
the buildable pad?
It encroaches into the setback area. That's what probably the words we want to use. That encroaches into the setback.
There's a great attorney that could work.
Required setback areas, how we would.
Can you utilize the areas that's in your buildable?
You can.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Plan setback.
It doesn't trigger the calculation.
So you can keep building that awning and then you cut that out and say now it's 50.
As soon as I cross my setback line at 20 feet or 10.
Councilman Bellston, you need to put something in there that wordsmith something just so.
And if you guys, we'll find the best words. I'll sit down with that. Unless you want us to bring it back, but I think we can find a simple part of a sentence that'll cover what I just say that encroaches in, that would encroach into the restricted setback areas. I think the words we'll use, something to that effect.
I'm okay approving it tonight is subject to, adding that definition in if that's.
And Thad and I, if you're good with that, Thad, we'll sit and come up with the best verb on that. And I know what you want in there. It'll cover that.
Sounds good to me. Just follow up, a further question. So like if I, wanted to build a building in my backyard or something, who do I come in and talk to, and who explains all this to me, and who does all the measuring of my backyard and calculations and all that?
Well, you'll come into the building department, but now we're aware, everybody, we had 2 people that aren't with us anymore, and I'm not blaming or the point of finger. They saw it one way, right? And when I explained it to them, they go, oh, we didn't really understand that. Because there were a lot of these folks were coming in and they had 12 feet still before they hit the building envelope thing, and they were getting, nailed for that. And so I told them, no, you can't calculate it that way, even though I understand, I know where they came from and why they did it, but I don't think they felt they had the authority to be able to do that. It should have come talk to me. I could have, again, cleared it up really fast.
Now, if you come in, you can maybe bring in a little sketch of your backyard with measurements and get help.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And Eldon and I can sit and explain that, and that's what, we've already, talked to our building department. That's what if someone comes in with something like that, please have us come over, we'll take a look at it.
If you have an acre, or like say you have an acre of land, you can build all this awning. It doesn't even touch this rule until you get to that 20 feet. If you had another 200 feet.
There you go. See, if you're, you put your home way up and you had all that setback to go to, yeah, you could extend this awning. And in fact, the awning could be bigger than your house square footage, and it still wouldn't even touch some of this because you're still, could be in your building envelope, right? So then we just say that it doesn't even touch this, you just get your permit and go.
Mayor,
Hold on, Councilman.
So that's for both, like the scenario you just gave, that's for both attached and detached. For attached. And shade. That is attached to your home.
That's attached to the home. Because it now becomes part of your home, which is then part of your building envelope. That's what the difference is.
I understand that the party that's interested in this, and that meets what they were looking for when they originally came to the city for consideration.
Yes, they seem content with what we brought forth.
Staff's recommendation, what we see tonight.
It is.
What else do you have to add, Eldon?
Thank you for your time and comments, and looking forward.
You feel like you've covered both fully? Feel okay about it?
I do, yeah, as long as Councilman Coates.
Councilman Bellison, did you have some other?
I'm just wondering if you're okay with one motion for both items or two motions?
Let's just go two. Are you ready? Yep. Go ahead.
I'll make the motion that we approve an ordinance amending Washington City Code Title 9-8B-6, modifying regulations, accessory buildings and structures, subject to a little clearer definition of the backyard calculation.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Belliston, second by Councilman Coates. We'll go roll call with Councilmember Ivy. Coates.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Belliston.
Aye.
Casperson. 8A passes 5-0. Happy for motion on 8B. Councilman Ivy, go ahead.
Thank you. I make a motion to approve an ordinance amending Washington City Code Title 9-8B-6, modifying regulations, attached accessory shade structure.
Have a motion by Councilman Ivy.
Second.
Point of clarification, can we add the same language that we did on the first one?
Okay, he said yes on adding the clarifications for the language as on 8A. I have a motion by Councilman Ivy, a second by Councilwoman Casperson. I know your name, I was just making sure you're still good with the second there. We'll go roll call on this with Councilmember Coates, Henderson,
Aye.
Belliston, Casperson, Ivy. That one also passes unanimously. We'll move on to report of officers from assigned committees. Start down there with you, Councilman Belliston. I know you had a retreat with the youth council. Anything else? You'll give us an update on that and anything else you have?
We've got a great bunch of kids down there, I'll tell you.
Did you keep my daughter in line?
We're up a little bit.
Yeah, that's my tactic too.
Well, I hope you didn't beat my son up, so he's a little fragile with all those muscles.
One of my shortcomings is I'm really bad with names, and so I've made a goal this year to learn all the kids' names and put some time and effort into that. I've never been able to be very good at that, but they're all great. And the mayor this year, remember her name, is going to do really, really well.
I can't remember either. Councilman Henderson.
I don't have anything, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything either tonight.
So I had a really good trip up north, went to legislative policy on Monday. It was really a good meeting. We talked a lot about housing affordability, the HAC, and some of their proposed guidelines for 2024 and some legislative action for those to support the 35,000 starter homes that Governor Cox initiated last year. Some things that we talked about is reducing zoning requirements, residential density by state law, administrative land use processes and expediting identical plan reviews. And then had really good meeting, and then had some conversation later that same day at the Capitol with Mr. Isom, our lobbyist, and had some good feedback on some of the things that we're doing there with the affordable housing bill that we're running and utilizing SITLA land for that, and that's really catching some really strong traction. There was a meeting today in St. George with the SITLA representatives and Waltrip from the governor's office and county commissioners to kind of lay out what some of those acreages would look like in southern Utah. And I'm just very pleased that the folks that have heard this idea that we've been rattling around here for years, that it's finally taken shape and actually going to come to fruition, it seems like, if things move well. But there's one bill that we're working on that will help to streamline this and make this process even better. And then the last thing I'd mention is that made it up to the UAMPS conference, and it was a really good conference. We were well represented there. We had some great friends and great information. But probably the most impactful speech that I heard was from the gentleman that you may remember that got his arm lodged between boulders, and he had to take off his own arm to get free. That was a very compelling speech, and to see him with his prosthesis, and it was really a good speech. But I was impressed by the organization of this UAMPS convention. We're Rick Hansen does a great job representing the city on the board, and I always feel like we've got cutting edge information. Dick and Laurie were there, and others. Rusty was there, and we were well represented, and it's important that we are represented because as we bring online more electric cars and needs for electricity, and we continue to shut down coal-operated plants, and we hesitate to bring on nuclear-powered plants, but we build solar farms and wind generation systems, it just seems like we need to make sure we keep both eyes on this so that we stay ahead of the demand, and so that we can, if we have another hot summer, we can enjoy the air conditioning that we did this year. But all in all, a really good trip, Mayor. I appreciated attending, and I think we were well represented.
Thank you, Councilman. Excellent report. Councilman Casperson.
We had a historic Preservation Commission meeting, and it was really productive. We were able to identify some more homes and places where you could put on the National Register of Historic Places. And then we're also going to start working on doing a grant that T-Mobile is giving out to go towards some of the funding for the gym. And so that's going to be, T-Mobile has a grant that they give out money to help revitalize historic buildings and, outdoor spaces, arts and community centers. And so we're going to work to apply for some funding for the gym.
Thank you for that report. Thank you for serving on that committee. I don't have anything to add, so we'll move on to city manager report.
Mayor, I'll follow your example and pass on my time tonight too. Thank you.
We have no need for closed session.
Mayor, I'll make a motion, we close the meeting then.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Coates.
Second.
Second by Councilman Belliston. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.